Hello and welcome to Women on Fire 2021. I am Claire Snowdon-Darling and I am incredibly excited to be talking to you again this year. It's a deep honour to have been invited back. I'm going to be talking you through the 6 foundations we must be teaching our clients to get them really well. And this is based on some work that we have been, I say we, my business partner and I have been really refining over the past couple of years, and I can't wait to share it with you. So let me just start sharing my screen and let's go. So yes, the 6 foundations of women's health we must be teaching our clients. So I am Claire Snowdon-Darling and I'm doing this job. I ended up doing this job because I nearly died in 2004 giving birth to my daughter. And the whole experience left me with chronic fatigue, depression, postpartum psychosis, and primary ovarian failure. So the primary ovarian failure is early menopause, and that was actually diagnosed in 2016. So I had a many years battle where I didn't know what was wrong with me. And I discovered alternative health for my own health issues. The medical model wasn't really able to help because it was chronic fatigue, and there isn't very much for chronic fatigue. And I had to go and find my own path. And this led to a career pivot in 2008. And in 2008, I founded Balance Wellness, which is a group of clinics in the South Coast. And my primary discipline is kinesiology. I'm going to talk you through a few elements of that later. But through my journey, being a wellness practitioner, supporting people, I realized that as much as I adore my discipline, there were things that were missing. And those things that are missing were leading to women staying unwell. And it was through this realization and through this journey that, alongside my business partner, the wonderful Laura Knowles, we created functional kinesiology. And in 2019, we launched the College of Functional Wellness. And I have now pivoted again. And whilst I am still a clinician and the head of the College of Functional Wellness, I am, through this process, have also become an author and a podcaster. And now I'm doing an awful lot of working on presenting our tools and our methodologies, because I'm deeply passionate about supporting women to get well. So Balance Wellness, a very respected chain of alternative health clinics, was launched in 2008. We're a community of practitioners and we specialize in hormones, blood sugars, adrenal health, digestive issues, immune function and emotional transformation. Now that doesn't sound like much of a specialism, because I appreciate there's quite a lot in there and, you know, niche down, but actually you're going to see shortly that they're really interconnected. We were the creators of a very medically admired IBS protocol in 2012. And if I'm honest, I really see the linear pathway to getting to where we are now, because creating that IBS protocol made us turn how we look at the body and health on its head. We also created the Consciously Healthy podcast, which has got a very fantastic following on YouTube and iTunes. And we created the Reclaim Your Life series, which is an online emotional transformation toolkit for women to deal with things like anxiety, to deal with feeling not good enough, and a lot of the common issues that we experience, that the women experience. Oh. Trying to do my thing. There we go. Technology is not my strong point. So the College of Functional Wellness, as I said, was launched in 2019, and we run courses in kinesiology, functional nutrition, and emotional coaching. So functional kinesiology was developed in 2016 and accredited in 2019. And it was born out of the creation of the triangle of hormonal health. And I'm going to talk to you about the triangle of hormonal health, because this is a really key area that we need to focus on to get people really well. And so our accredited training that we offer is, as I was saying, functional wellness coaching, which is an amalgamation of the nutrition, diet, the hormone work. It's deeply exciting work, and it really gives practitioners of any discipline the opportunity to use the hormone protocols and methodologies that we have created. We do have functional kinesiology, which is, we'll talk to you more about later, but it's fantastic as a bolt-on for existing practitioners or as a standalone therapy. We also have Nutrition for Health, which is a foundation course or an add-on to an existing practice, foundation coaching skills, business marketing mastery, this is all of our previous experience in business and marketing brought together as a course. And also we have another practitioner course, which is called Holding Space, which is actually my favorite work. And it is a transformative emotional program, not only for our clients, but also for us. So let's start at the very beginning. We are in the middle of a global health crisis. And I'm actually not talking about the pandemic here. I'm talking about the fact that 80% of adults have at least one chronic condition, and 68% or more have two chronic conditions. And I wanted to look at what the common chronic conditions are, because that is the global health crisis. And most of us practitioners are seeing people with these conditions. And I know that when I started getting people coming in with, a litany of health issues, I could get a little bit overwhelmed and not know what to do. Now, obviously, I'm just going to say up front, we allow the medical model to work on the condition. We're looking at the background issues and how to support the client that way. So we're in a global health crisis because of climate change and pollution, because of pesticides and the food chain depletion. We have a struggling NHS. We have a lot of medication usage, including the pill and HRT. We have these chronic health conditions, so high blood pressure, high cholesterol, arthritis, heart disease, diabetes, kidney disease, heart failure, depression, Alzheimer's and dementia, and COPD. We're dealing on a day-to-day basis with diabetes, obesity, these inflammatory conditions that just seem to be ongoing and everywhere, hormone imbalances, and of course now cancer has elevated to a rate of 1 in 2. It's quite a gloomy picture actually when you start looking at the health of the population. So what do we do about it? Well, like I said, we're going to allow the medical model to do what the medical model needs to do. We, however, can start to look at what I like to call a whole health approach. So I'm going to talk you through the 6 foundations. The first one is a whole health approach. So this is actually something that comes from kinesiology, which I absolutely adore, which is what we call working with the different realms of the body. So if we think about the human body, it's made up of 4 distinct areas or systems, I suppose. There's our biochemical system. So this is to do with food, diet, food intolerances, things that we can actually look at to build the body up. So herbs, vitamins, minerals, chemicals. And I mean, there are some chemicals that we use because they're chemicals the body use. So we're going to talk about that later when we talk about things like liver detoxing. But also we have an issue with chemicals because we are overwhelmed, like I was saying, with pesticides, pollution. We're overwhelmed with the toxic chemicals that are going on our skin and in our cleaning products, that we're literally surrounded by these biochemical agents. We then have emotional aspect of the human body and of our day-to-day life. So obviously there's an awful lot of onus put these days on emotional intelligence, and learning that is work. It takes work, it takes being guided, it takes being coached. We work with something called the emotional substructures, which is a clinical model that we have put together. And it's talking about, a lot of therapies will focus on the behavior. Let's change the behavior. NLP can do that a little bit. Cognitive behavior therapy will do that quite a lot. It's changed the behavior, but the thing is, the behavior is a symptom. We have to drop underneath the behavior and look at not just the emotion. There is an emotion that drives that behavior, and a lot of therapies will look at that. They'll be looking at, counseling will be dealing with the emotions, and other sort of EFT, emotional freedom technique, will be dealing with the emotions. But there's a third layer, and this is why we call them the substructures. And that third layer is starting to look at the core wounds that are in all of us. There are 5 core wounds of humanity. And when we deal with the emotional substructures, the emotions change and the behaviors change. So we have got this really fast way of tackling and dealing with clients' issues and our own issues. And we then use a variety of techniques to get into dealing with those core wounds. So the point of telling you all this is because if you've got a client and you are working biochemically, but you're not fixing the issue, maybe it's time to look at the emotional. So we also then have the electrical system of the body. We are electrical beings. Our brain operates by electricity. Our muscles operate by electricity. And so we have, our nervous system is electrical. We then have to look at things like the acupuncture meridians. We have other electrical systems in the body, and water also supports the electrical system of our body. And a lot of people are chronically dehydrated, so we need to look at that. We then have the structural system of the body. And so, of course, this is our muscles, it's our posture, it's the body mechanics and how it works, but it's also underlying structures. So things like the ileocecal valve that lives in the bowel, the rings of Houston in the bowel, where the uterus is, in the place in the pelvis, and being able to change that. So, people who are physiotherapists, fantastic. Thank you for all that you're doing. If you're not getting a client fully well, maybe there are issues in the biochemical, the emotional, or the electrical realms that can be what's causing this issue to stay in place. And so this is one of the reasons I fell in love initially with kinesiology, was because we look at all of those things. But you too can look at all of those things, or at least have an awareness that, if I'm with my specialism not able to get someone well, maybe it's here, maybe it's here, maybe it's here. And so by even being able to ask some questions and then, collaborate, if you don't want to go and do the work to learn some of the other bits and pieces, we can make big changes with collaboration. However, I'm going to talk to you about how you can add in you don't have to have, a degree in each of these areas. We can learn some basic tools and techniques to be able to support our clients to move forward. Oh, I don't know why my computer doesn't like me moving on my PowerPoint, but let's move on to foundation 2. So we need to understand hormone interplay, because if we don't understand how the hormones are working in the body, we aren't going to be able to move forward. Now, again, we don't need to have this in-depth biochemical knowledge. We just need to have a bit of an overview. So I'm going to talk you through that in a moment, once I hydrate to deal with my electrical system. So introducing the triangle of hormonal health. And so this was the creation that I developed in 2016. Ultimately, there are thousands of hormones in the human body, and we could spend an entire lifetime training as an endocrinologist and still not have an understanding of what they all do perfectly. But the triangle of hormonal health is actually a clinical model that I created, and it breaks down this complex system of hormones into an incredibly easy to understand structure. Now, basically, the triangle of hormonal health looks at the interplay between 3 sets of hormones. And we're going to come on to why those in a moment. Those 3 sets of hormones are our blood sugar hormones, our stress hormones, and are sex hormones. Now, these three sets of hormones are deeply, deeply connected. And what I want you to imagine is like a stool. I want the stool to be perfectly balanced. So when these three sets of hormones are in balance, we're well. However, when one goes out of balance, we now have a wonky stool. It puts pressure on the other two, and we might see one of those start to go down and then the other one go down. And then we end up with this picture of ill health. We're actually going to look at how it's these three sets of hormones that are massive contributory factors to the chronic conditions that we're seeing in the world today. So one of the interesting things is that when this stool isn't balanced, the first victims end up being the digestive system and the immune system. Now, how many people are dealing with digestive issues? It's like 1 in 3. I actually think it's more than that. That's the people that have been to the doctor to be diagnosed. When we start to see that the digestive system is a victim of an imbalance in the triangle of hormonal health, now we can look at it differently. And similarly, the immune system is a victim of the triangle of hormonal health. So now we can look at it differently. And this is what I mean by the doctors can do what the doctors are going to do, because we're going to be looking in a completely different area. So we've got the liver mentioned in the middle, and it's because you'll see later the liver is just, it does so much in the body, and it's the liver overwhelm that can start to contribute to a lot of the issues that we are seeing with things like inflammation. So let's move on. We're going to start with blood sugar hormones. Now, one of the reasons I start with blood sugar hormones is because they're the easiest of the three to get back in balance. Now, we're not just talking about insulin. Insulin is obviously the one that's very well known when it comes to blood sugar stabilization, but there are others. Now, insulin itself lowers blood sugar. You know, we've eaten a biscuit, blood sugars rise, insulin goes into the bloodstream, blood sugars lower. That's, you know, it's one of its primary functions. However, it also is involved in fat storage. So when people are looking to lose weight or they're in inflammation, we need to make sure that they're not having a sort of constant insulin response. We then also have something called leptin, and leptin is about appetite control, and it's also very much about fat burning. And then we also have ghrelin, and ghrelin is our hunger hormone. So as we've eaten, as our blood sugars, as we start to use up that fuel, we build up the hormone ghrelin, and it's ghrelin, I like to call gremlin, that ultimately then makes our tummy rumble. And we have cholecystokinin, or CCK. And cholecystokinin is our satisfaction hormone. Now, all of this might not sound particularly interesting at the moment, but what is very interesting is cholecystokinin is very implicated in digestion. And we also see a lot of women who aren't fat burning, who either aren't hungry or are always hungry, or don't have that switch off mechanism. Now, this for me is this signal that something is going on in their blood sugar hormones, and we can do something about it. So I just want to talk you through what's happening when we don't have balanced blood sugars. So the green line is a well-balanced diet, and this is what our blood sugars should be doing on a day-to-day basis. Now, we wake up and we're usually hungry. So as you can see, there's a red line, you know, that's doing this. So we wake up often. If we've not been woken up by alarm clock, we'll actually wake up because our blood sugars have dropped below a certain level, and the optimum level, and our body will say, I need food. So what it does is it sends a signal to our brains, and that signal is the production of cortisol. Now, cortisol, of course, we know is a stress hormone. The body is under stress because it's got a suboptimal amount of blood sugars. Cortisol puts sugar, there's a whole conversion that happens in our body, and it puts sugar into our bloodstream and into our muscles so that we can get up, go get food. If we eat something that's predominantly carbohydrates, so let's think about our muesli, our granola, our porridge, our blood sugars are going to rise, they're going to spike. And then what happens is we have to produce insulin. Now remember, insulin is fat storage, so we don't really want to produce that much insulin. Now, insulin doesn't just take our blood sugars back to where they should be, they take them back to where it's come from. So now our blood sugars have dropped, we get a hit of cortisol again. So now you can see that with the triangle of hormonal health, we've got this very clear interplay between the blood sugar hormones and the stress hormones. So if we haven't resolved a client's diet, we aren't going to be getting them well because their body is in a blood sugar roller coaster. Now, we're going to talk a little bit about diet because we have to get the diet right. Otherwise, people aren't going to, we're going to be producing insulin. If we're eating sandwiches, if we're eating crisps, if we're eating cake, if we're eating sugary coffees, this is going to be causing blood sugar instability. So we need to find ways of getting those blood sugars maintained and balanced. Now, it's also really interesting to note that we could have a perfect diet, but if we're highly, highly stressed, cortisol's been going into the bloodstream anyway. And, you know, there are reports of people developing diabetes purely because they're stressed and because of that cortisol insulin connection. So we really need to be aware of blood sugars. One of the other causes of blood sugar instability is eating food we're intolerant to. And this is a big part of the picture. Now, one of the big wows for me was when I realized, maybe 6 years ago now, that every time we put food into our mouths, we will have a hormonal response. I'm going to say that again. Every time we put food into our mouth, we will have a hormonal response. Now, that hormone response is either one that is producing the hormones to get us well and to fat burn, or it's a hormone response that gets us into fat storage and cortisol. That is not a mouthful of food that is taking us towards wellness. So I always thought of hormones as being these really abstract things, but they're not. As soon as food goes into our mouth, we're having a hormonal response. And so that is why this is such a key part of the picture. It's also why I start with it first. Now, one of the greatest things about blood sugars is we can change that because we're going to be putting food into our mouths. If we eat 3 times a day, we're putting food into our mouths 21 times a week. We can change that, and we can change it now. Now, actually, it only takes sort of 5 or 6 days to get your blood sugars really, really under control. So this is why I start with it first, because it's incredibly quick and it's empowering for clients to see change. So as I was saying, if we're eating predominantly carbohydrates, that is where we start to see issue. Now, what people don't often realize is that carbohydrates are fruit, carbohydrates are root veg. They think of carbs as being crisps and alcohol or chocolate, but carbs are, rice, they're oatcakes, it's our granola. Even though these are healthy things that we want in our diet, they're carbohydrates. So it's not about not having them because we need them for thyroid health and fiber and all of the phytonutrients. It's about understanding that there's an optimal amount of carbs to have per meal that won't cause insulin spiking. And we must have them alongside protein and fats. So let's move on to stress hormones in our triangle of hormonal health. So we've already covered that stress hormones can be produced in the body by diet, and we've covered that they can be produced by eating foods we're intolerant to. But there are many reasons why we're going to be producing stress hormones, right? We produce them in response to toxic chemicals we put on our skin. We produce them in response to pollution. We produce them, in response to our emotional issues and a very busy lifestyle. Now, that should be all very well and good. But what happened when we, thousands of years ago, we would produce stress hormones in response to danger. And we would run away, and if we managed to make it away from the saber-toothed tiger, we would then afterwards rest and recover. So the way that this works is there is something called the HPA axis. And we're going to talk about the hypothalamus, which is our nervous system in the brain, and the anterior and the pituitary gland, which is the leader of the orchestra and tells the body what to do, tells all the glands what to do. And we're going to talk about the adrenal glands, the adrenal cortex. Now, in the HPA axis, the hypothalamus and the anterior pituitary, one or the other, will perceive danger. So let's just say it was a saber-toothed tiger behind us. So that would be our hypothalamus is our eyes, ears, nose, mouth, smell, all those things. It's sensing danger. So I've heard something behind me. I turn around and I see a saber-toothed tiger behind me. Oh my gosh, okay, I need to run away. Or with the pituitary, it would be like the blood sugar's dropping and it will be sensing danger from mostly inside the body. Oh my gosh, I'm going to need cortisol. I need to get up and go get food. So either these two or both together will send a signal to the adrenals to say, could you please make cortisol? And once the adrenals have produced the cortisol, cortisol goes into the bloodstream, there's a feedback loop, which you can see in this red line, that goes back to the pituitary and the hypothalamus and says, hey guys, I've produced the cortisol, stop sending the memo. And so they're supposed to go, okay, I'll stop sending the memo. But that was in response to something that happened 20 minutes ago. Subsequently, the kids have had an argument in the car, or you've drunk some coffee, or you've got a text message for something that's happening at work, and we're stressed again. And so they're sending the memo, and we're constantly in this production of cortisol. And after we've produced a certain amount of it, this feedback loop gets switched off. And so now we've just got this message, make cortisol, make cortisol, make cortisol, make cortisol. And so the body is in this dysfunction. So it's called HPA axis dysregulation when that happens. And we need to find ways to switch that off, because otherwise we're just in this, free fall of making stress hormones, which is where our triangle will then go off kilter. So our endocrine system, I've just given you a little bit of a 101, but it also includes our thyroid, which a lot of people hear about. It also includes our thymus, which is our immune. It includes our pancreas. Now, a lot of people are confused by that, because the pancreas is to do with digestion predominantly, but also we have the insulin aspect. So the pancreas does two really important jobs. But when it's so busy working on the insulin, it can't do its job digestively. We then have the adrenal glands sitting on top of the kidneys, and then we have our ovaries and testes. That's the whole of the endocrine system. Now, if we have dysfunction in the endocrine system, we will end up with symptoms like the ones listed here: tired and exhausted, wired and racy feelings, sugar cravings, inflammation, digestive problems, colds, bugs, sleeping difficulty, headaches, weight gain or loss, being hot and cold, not being able to regulate your temperature, low sex drive, irregular periods. Now, a lot of those things won't be picked up on medically, because they won't show up in blood tests, but they are signs of a stressed endocrine system. So we can already look at diet, look at food intolerance, and deal with the stress hormones. So we're going to move over to sex hormones. So our sex hormones, obviously we have estrogen, biggie. That's a stimulator, gives us energy. It's ovulation, metabolism, energy, libido, mood. It protects our heart. It's also an insulin regulator, so it's a really, really big one. Progesterone calms us. It's part of what holds a pregnancy. It's to do with fertility, cycle regulation, mood, bloating, sleep, hair, skin, periods, bone health, muscle health, and reduces inflammation. All hail the mighty progesterone. And women are often surprised to know that they have testosterone too. So this is our libido, energy, bone health, breast health, fertility, menstrual and vaginal health. So all three of those are incredibly important for our triangle over here. However, we have a situation called the pregnenolone steal, which is those hormones aren't just made in our ovaries, they're also made in our adrenal glands that we were talking about earlier. Now, our adrenal glands use cholesterol to make, and so this is why fats are so important in our diets. The low-fat diets of yesteryear, hopefully no one's doing them anymore, caused umpteen issues in our health. So cholesterol produces, we can make a hormone called pregnenolone from cholesterol. Now, pregnenolone is brilliant, and it will make DHEA, which is the anti-aging, vitality, energy hormone, and DHEA goes on to make testosterone and estrogen. However, more importantly for this story, pregnenolone also makes progesterone. Now, progesterone was the all hail the mighty progesterone. However, let's go back to basics. If we have got a saber-toothed tiger behind us, is it more important for the body to make progesterone, which will hold a baby, or is it more important to get away out of danger? It's more important to get away from danger. So the body will, instead of making progesterone, it will choose to make cortisol. So now we end up with a situation that we haven't got enough progesterone. And one of the key things in a woman's body is the balance of progesterone and estrogen. And now we haven't got the progesterone. Interestingly, at the top that I didn't talk you through earlier is we know about adrenaline because everyone knows about adrenaline, but aldosterone has been a highly sort of overlooked hormone, and aldosterone is actually massively responsible for blood pressure. And it's also hugely responsible for fluid retention and potassium. And so you think about women who are getting palpitations, if you think about women who have got fluid retention, these are, again, big signs that there's issues in the adrenal glands. Not necessarily a heart issue, although that could be the case, but a lot of people are put on heart medication, but actually it's an issue in the adrenal glands. So we can be looking at that, because even just fundamentally sorting out diet and food intolerances could fundamentally change this symptom. So I'd like to talk you through as well now the bowel hormone storm. So that was our triangle. Let's talk about why digestion is a victim. So this came from our IBS protocol, and it was this real realization that IBS is nothing to do with the bowel. It's just nothing to do with the bowel. So we now call it the bowel hormone storm, because this isn't just about IBS. It actually is about any kind of digestive disruption. So let's start with the blood sugar instability, because even as I've spoken, most people's diets lead to blood sugar instability. Even if we're eating really healthy foods, they might just be quite high in carbohydrates. So particularly at the moment, we're battling a lot with that with the vegan diets. And it's not that I'm anti-vegan. We just need to just put in a lot more protein at every meal, and that protein needs to come from an actual protein source, like protein powders or tofu. But I don't advise that in perimenopause. So let's look at blood sugar instability. So the blood sugar instability will actually, cause this high insulin. But not only that, it affects a hormone in the small intestine called motilin. Now, motilin's job is to create motility in the small intestine. So when we don't have that, we will actually lead to a lack of peristalsis, which is the movement along the bowel. And that can then cause constipation or diarrhea. Now, when we have the blood sugar instability, we've already talked about how that causes high adrenaline and cortisol. Now, there's a connection with the ileocecal valve, the ICV, that when we have a cortisol imbalance or when we're stressed, we actually end up with muscles in the legs shortening and tightening, and we actually, our pelvis will rotate and rotate one way or another to keep our pelvis stable. But what happens is that puts pressure on the ileocecal valve, and it will either get stuck open or shut, and that will definitely contribute to this irritable bowel syndrome, and IBS-C is constipation, or D with the diarrhea. Now, also when we have elevated cortisol levels and adrenaline, we will stop us producing enzymes and acid. And this is to do with, we've got two nervous systems, two sides of the nervous system, the sympathetic nervous system, which is our get up and go, and our parasympathetic nervous system, which is our wind down and relax. Now, if we've got adrenaline and cortisol in the system, we aren't going to go into wind down and relax. So it's when we're winding down and relaxing, or rest and digest, we're not going to be making the enzymes because we're not in that side of the nervous system. Now, that in turn boosts serotonin and pain, not progesterone, I was reading the other bit. It boosts serotonin and pain. So if we then also have, because of this elevated cortisol, remember I said if we're making cortisol, we're not making enough progesterone, we've now got this low progesterone, but high estrogen situation. High estrogen, going back to our triangle of hormonal health, is really interesting because we actually elevate histamine. Now, histamine is our immune response. This is why the immune is implicated here. And we get greater inflammation. We know that feeling when we've got something like irritable bowel syndrome. It really feels inflamed and horrible. This leads to more food intolerances. So I know when I was really in this in my 20s, I just felt like I was becoming allergic to the world. I just couldn't, even drink water without having a food intolerance. And it's just such elevated histamine. Our mast cells are like this, our immune system's like this. So now we have food we're intolerant to. We have this buildup of estrogen, cortisol, serotonin in the bowel because we're not clearing it. And our liver has become really, really, really overwhelmed. It's not able to do its job, which then causes IBS. And so because of all this buildup of hormones in the bowel and not being able to move it through. So when we have IBS, we start eating erratically, which guess what? Leads to a blood sugar instability, and around we go. And so this is a really common situation when we're dealing with gut issues. And so what this then has a knock-on effect with is our gut microbiome. And so of course, gut microbiome was only discovered in 2010. It's still so new, our learning of this. 40,000 parasites, 5 million fungi, 300,000 bacteria in the body. When it's disrupted, it's incredibly sensitive to refined carbohydrates, pesticides, medication, and foods we're intolerant to. And when it's disrupted, our bacteria produce something called endotoxins. And these endotoxins create inflammation. And this is a really big part of the issue. Now, we need our gut microbiome to be in balance because it actually detoxes this excess estrogen. And so many people are walking around with this estrogen dominance. If we're not detoxing our estrogen, what then happens is we start to mimic estrogen with these endotoxins, and this is called xenoestrogens. And oh my gosh, now we're not only have we got excess estrogen, we're compounding it by making extra estrogen. And this is where we start to see a lot of inflammatory conditions, a lot of obesity, and this is part of the reason why, even men with obesity have the moobs. It's all estrogen, estrogen, estrogen. So we need to get our body back to a place where it's clearing the estrogen, where our microbiome is healthy, and where we are eliminating our waste properly. So the immune system is a victim. So our immune system is obviously our natural response to foreign invaders, and a dysfunctional immune system response. I always say it's so rarely that kiwi you eat once a month. It's what are we doing every day that's causing these issues? What are we doing every day? What am I eating that I'm intolerant to? What toxins am I putting on or in my body that could then also be contributing to xenoestrogens? Do I have a chronic infection that could be something like a bacterial overgrowth in your gut? Am I under high stress? So rather than going for the standard approach, which is suppressing the immune system, we need to ask the question, why is the immune system responding the way it's responding? And when we start to break it down with this picture of whole health, the biochemical, the emotional, the electrical, the structural, now we can see this as a big picture. So the liver's role, just to touch on that, its job is to produce cholesterol for hormone production. It's also part of the storage of glycogen and therefore very involved in blood sugars. And it also creates bile for digestion, and that in itself is how we break down fat to absorb vitamins. So fat is so important because how we get our vitamins. It's also responsible for excreting of excess cholesterol, and it excretes our toxins and hormones, including our stress hormones and this extra estrogen. So when it's not functioning properly, we're not doing that. And this is why I was saying at the beginning that some of the chemicals that we use, they're naturally sourced, but and from food, but we actually are able to use some chemical supplements, so nutraceuticals I call them instead of pharmaceuticals, that actually do are the chemicals that the liver's using to break this down. So that gets really exciting when we're able to really support a client to get the liver working more effectively, particularly in the peri to post menopause phase, when the liver just gets a little bit more suppressed anyway. So let's go back to the chronic conditions we talked about earlier and the connections to the hormones, because this is what gets really interesting. Insulin, hugely responsible and implicated in anxiety and depression. And actually, so is CCK. Remember that hormone I mentioned at the beginning, hugely responsible for anxiety. What is one of the most prescribed for conditions in the country right now? It's anxiety. Anti-anxiety meds are huge. Diabetes, obviously, very implicated in insulin, kidney disease, massive connection, and obesity with that fat storage. Then when we get on to sex hormones, well, we're seeing, breast cancers going through the roof. We're seeing uterine cancers going through the roof. Osteoporosis is to do with the sex hormone imbalance, estrogen, progesterone. Obesity, like I was saying, with those xenoestrogens and that estrogen we're not detoxing. Cortisol is hugely implicated in vascular hypertension. So again, this blood pressure issue, and anxiety and depression, because if our body is constantly in stress, it's overwhelmed. Then we have inflammation, which are prostaglandins. Well, this is so further down the road. Our triangle's been out of balance for so long. Now we're actually seeing real deep immune disease coming in. Arthritis, COPD, other autoimmune diseases, Alzheimer's, and the imbalanced cholesterol. So, of course, this is referring back to the 10 chronic conditions. But when you start to look at the hormones that are responsible for them, but rather than just go straight in with the symptom and medication and let's let the doctors do what they're doing, we can support our clients by educating them about this triangle and about diet, food intolerances, getting their stress under control and getting those sex hormones under control. It is incredibly exciting and incredibly effective. So, foundation 3, we have to work in stages. And I can't emphasize this enough. It's important to work first on blood sugar balancing and diet. Then we can look at reducing stress. So just getting a client to change their diet straight away and looking at foods they could be intolerant to. That's really essential. And there are ways to find out how to look at foods people are intolerant to. Get that dealt with first. Then once they're feeling better, I call it putting the scaffolding in. Put the scaffolding in. Now let's talk about stress reduction. What's going on emotionally that you can ditch? Where are you feeling out of control? This is where all of our great coaching skills can come in. Now we're going to look at the hormone balancing. We literally work with the triangle as if we're reading it from left to right. That takes a bit longer to balance hormones, but we can do that by, again, we've changed the diet. A lot of this will happen automatically by getting that foundation piece in straight away. Now we can look at liver detoxing. There's no point detoxing when we are just awash with cortisol and dietary issues, because by doing the blood sugars, the stress, the hormone balancing, the liver will actually start doing its detoxing job so much better anyway, then it might not need interference from us. But particularly a body that is stressed and overwhelmed going into a liver detox or a bowel detox, I'm like, you've got to stop. You have to stop. You have to let your body do this bit by bit. And it can be quick. It doesn't even have to take months and months. It can be quick. I've had situations where I've changed, people's diets, and 2 weeks later, so many symptoms have gone. It's so exciting. Then we can look at the digestive system, because again, what's the point in trying to do a microbiome detox if you're just like putting food you're intolerant into it all the time, or your hormones aren't balanced? It's not going to be able to detox. And then we can look at immune function. But just trying to go here or somewhere in the middle without getting those foundations in place is not really going to change things effectively, quickly, and long term. So it is essential to work in logical progression. We have to get those basics right before moving on to the next stage. And more often than not, we don't even need to get on to the next stage. That's what ends up really, really exciting. So foundation 4, holding emotional space. You know, how often do people come in and they want, to offload it? It becomes something about their partner or their children or their concerns or their financial issues. So we need to be able to support our clients to have emotional resilience and to manage the process, particularly. And what I mean by that is these stages, people want to get to what they consider the important, sexy bits. Actually, we're in a process. Allow it to unfold. Okay, I can support you through this journey. Together we've got this. We really do need to learn how to not rescue our clients and learn how to become comfortable with the uncomfortable, because otherwise we're never going to be dealing with those deep stresses in ourselves and with them. Learning how to ask the right questions at the right times and being able to be with any emotion that presents. Ultimately, this is our massive gift and opportunity as frontline coaches. We can make such huge change. We don't have to be qualified counselors to do this work. We can go on a journey and learn some basics to be able to do this. It's without, if you're just placating people and trying to put a patch on it, I really encourage you to find a different way, because we get the opportunity to make deep change with our clients. So as I was sort of talking about, we have our behaviors, we have our emotions, and we have the core wounds. And when we understand what they are, it's not a big job to learn them. When we understand what they are and we can give a client a technique to go deal with that core wound, guess what? The emotion changes. And now I don't need to comfort eat that cake. Because how many times do a client go in and go, oh, I didn't do my exercises. I forgot. I couldn't. Oh, I just, you're hearing lack of self-worth, no discipline, no desire. Rather than trying to tackle it there, you can find out very quickly what the core wound is, give them a tool to deal with that. Now they're doing their exercises. Now they're eating the foods that you're asking them to eat. Now they're, doing whatever it is, homework that you have requested of them. This is absolutely essential. This adulting, actually, this learning to have the discipline, I call it self-parenting. Absolutely magical. So foundation 5, understanding and reducing stressors. I touched on it earlier, but these really are the biggies: food intolerances and diet. Now, I work with what I call the hierarchy of food intolerances. So it's a very simple process. We don't need very expensive hair tests. We don't need, it's not going to show up in blood tests. These are subclinical, but they're like, if I'm drip feeding arsenic into my diet every single day, I'm not going to get well. So it's a very quick way of finding out what food intolerances are, but just by looking at someone's dietary sheets. So eliminating food intolerances and shifting diet so that we're eating the protein, fats, and carbs in the right ratio each time we eat, so we're getting the right hormone balance. Not hormone imbalance. Contraception, essential to look at. I really recommend that you do the research on why contraception is causing problems. So obviously, load of estrogen in bodies that don't have enough progesterone causes more estrogen dominance. If people are on contraception that includes progesterone, it's not progesterone, it's a synthetic called progestin. And progestin actually acts more like testosterone in the body. And we've seen, testosterone ramps us up. We need the all hail the mighty progesterone. Now, by adding progestin into the body, again, that's a stressor, so that stops our body making the progesterone. So women end up in such a pickle when they are having the synthetic progestin in their body. And please do not believe what the doctors say when they say that if it's a Mirena coil, it's not systemic progestin, it's localized. I don't even understand that. It's a blood system. I don't understand it. It's in your blood system. How can it just be around your uterus? It goes everywhere. So we really need to be educating women to look at alternatives, and particularly with HRT, looking at other ways like bioidenticals. We have to look at electromagnetic radiation. Remember the B's, the biochemical, emotional, electrical. Electromagnetic radiation is absolutely annihilating our human bodies. Lifestyle. Now, by lifestyle, I'm talking about, are you doing the right exercise at the right time, or are you doing intensive HIIT classes every single day? Because if you are, you're putting stress into your body. We need to be finding the right exercise for the right time of day, and where we are in our life cycle, monthly cycles, all of that stuff. Then, of course, we've got emotional pressure. I mean, who hasn't? We're talking about financial pressure, family pressure, child pressure, work pressure. It's just pressure, body image pressure. Toxic chemicals are huge. You know, they contain chemicals called endocrine disruptor chemicals. We don't want our endocrine disrupted. I recently found out the skin actually makes cortisol in response to toxic chemicals. We have got to educate people to put stuff on our skin that is healthy for our bodies. And then finally, and by no means least, pesticides and also pollution, massive stressors in our body that are contributing to these health crises. And we're not going to do this all in one go, right? But bit by bit by bit, we can change how, what influences are going into our bodies, our nervous systems, and ultimately our endocrine. So foundation 6, I've talked about it a lot, targeted diet and nutrition. So we need to make sure, as I've said, that we are eating those balanced macronutrients. Now, frighteningly, 46% of adults are not even achieving the minimum amount of protein in the recommended daily allowance. That is shocking. Protein is everything. We need loads of it. It heals us. It's the building blocks. It's everything. If we haven't got enough protein, our bodies will be in stress. We have to get the right levels of protein into our bodies. Eating protein every meal, 3 times a day. And where possible, eating organic. Now, because of the pesticides, if we can't, and also because non-organic food is sprayed with enzyme inhibitors. Now, enzyme inhibitors are also what stop us from making digestive enzymes. So we need to look where we can at organic. Now, if you can't change all your diet, then I recommend Googling this year's Clean 15, which are the cleanest, the 15 cleanest foods, and eliminating the dirty dozen. But that changes each year about which ones are sprayed with the worst pesticides or the most pesticides. And so we can then target what we choose to buy organically and what we don't. Targeted nutrition. So like I said, vitamins, minerals, magnesium is essential, 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 essential for all women. But finding the right magnesium, because you need a different one if you've got loose bowels, constipation, or you're getting muscle twitches. We need to find the right magnesium. Omega fats are so important. Amino acids are the protein building blocks. We need to get those in, preferably in food. Digestive aid for people if they're not digesting and they're in that inflammatory issue. Adaptogenic herbs. Now, if we go back to the HPA axis dysregulation, adaptogenic herbs fix that. They are huge in reducing stress. Then also we can look at digestive herbs and gut repair. More importantly, once we've cleaned everything out, we need to repair that gut, because leaky gut is a massive cause of inflammation. Estrogen detoxing, and also boosting progesterone naturally. This is how we can support our clients. So, as a recap, the 6 foundations of health: a whole health approach, biochemical, emotional, electrical, and structural. Work with the triangle of hormonal health. Work in stages. Learn how to hold emotional space. Reduce and manage stressors, and find targeted nutrition. So, for a lot of people, that might be like, well, there's a load of stuff. I'm not a nutritionist. I'm not a counselor. This is why we've actually created our college, because we wanted to help practitioners have bolt-ons to their existing practices to be able to work in this way. Or for people who want to learn from the very beginning, we have all of it. So we have functional kinesiology, which is accredited by the Kinesiology Federation and the Federation of Holistic Therapists, and CNHC registered. It is actually the ultimate practitioner training. I'm deeply, deeply proud of it. It is the whole health approach. We work structurally, nutritionally, emotionally, and electrically. We work on the blood sugars, adrenals, hormones, digestion, immune, and it includes this incredible training course called Holding Space, which is accredited in its own right. This wonderful immersive experience that I was telling you about for us to be able to work with our clients' emotions. And there's monthly attendance. So that is, and you also learn the kinesiology muscle testing, which is how we can do things like food testing. It's absolutely fantastic, absolutely fantastic. And we also learn, if you're a physical therapist now, you learn that there are 42 muscles in the body. So when someone's posture isn't, you know, correct, we find that the 42 muscles in the body that are linked to organs. So by looking at someone's posture, so if their glutes aren't working, us kinesiologists are going, that's hormones. If someone, you know, has got really weak lat issues, that can actually be a real sign of blood sugar instability. And so we learn about these muscle organ connections, and then we can look at the nutrition to fix it. It is a game changer. However, not everyone wants to be a kinesiologist. So we have developed our functional wellness coaching, and we are incredibly proud of it. So suitable for any practitioner. We work with the triangle of hormonal health in a staged approach. So that's ultimately what you're doing. You're working as a health coach, and you are specializing in blood sugars, adrenals, hormones, digestion, and immune. And it includes coaching and business modules. So you can start, you know, if you've never done any of this work before, you can start. And if you already are in practice, it will tie in beautifully, because it's going to give you all of that nutritional information that you need. It includes being able to do lab testing. If you get to a certain stage and you're kind of going, okay, well, the diet and stuff isn't working, it's not got them where you want to be, now we can do some lab testing. But we do that, you know, much further down the journey, because by making those basic changes, like I said, so many people get well. So that would just be for your really tricky people. It includes, it's all online. So you can start anytime, and you've got a couple of years to do it. So this is accredited by the Federation of Holistic Therapists. And yeah, it's very exciting, because we really get to see this work with more practitioners. So holding space, I love it so much. This is the accredited emotional training for practitioners. And again, this is accredited by the FHT and Kinesiology Federation. It is life-changing work. Every person who has done this course has come out changed. It's utterly glorious. It includes a 6-day retreat. It is life-changing work. Ultimately, we tend to do this for our clients, but it is a personal journey of exploration. It includes monthly mentoring, and it also includes a coaching certificate. That part of it's delivered online, and you also have a lot of groups and community support whilst you're going through this process. Now, we are going to be on that. We learn a lot more about the emotional substructures. We teach inner child parenting to really, you know, learn how to deal with those core wounds and just move into a whole new paradigm. Like, let's forget those behaviors. Let's forget those emotions. Let's get into a whole new paradigm where we are dealing with root cause. If you're just interested in some of this nutrition that I've talked about, we have a Nutrition for Health foundation course. Basically, it's not just a foundation, it's for anyone who just wants to add a nutrition course into their work, or it is as a foundation course. So this is included in both functional kinesiology and functional wellness coaching, but it has your nutrition. It's, I can't remember how many hours, 50 something hours. We also do foundation coaching skills, which again is included in holding space. But if you just want to do some basic coaching and learn a little bit more about how to be with clients, again, this is a short course. We have the business marketing mastery, and this is, as I said earlier, historically, both Laura and I were in business and marketing. And so it's everything, if you're just really not getting anywhere and you really want to sort of be able to fix it, those things. And we also offer a lot of CPD lectures and talks, including sort of 3-hour hormone masterclass. So we have a lot of online stuff dedicated to practitioners. So just to give you an idea, our teaching platform, each course is supported with a lifetime access of online training. So there are lectures, there's demos, there's lessons, there's resources. It is utterly gorgeous. We're, yeah, deeply, deeply proud of it. I've said that a few times, but we really, really are. So would love for you to go and check out what we are doing. We have functionalkinesiology.co.uk if you're specifically interested in that journey, and if you're interested in the other courses. So the coaching, holding space, the short courses, then go to functionalwellness.co.uk, or to be honest, you go to either and you'll get to the other one as well. So please, please get involved with us. We are prolific on social media. So on Facebook, we've got the College of Functional Wellness, we've got Functional Kinesiology UK, balancedwellness.uk, and also me, Claire Snowdon-Darling official. I tend to talk more about hormones and menopause, but we talk about all of it on the other platforms. And then on Instagram, where we're very prolific, College of Functional Wellness, Functional Kinesiology UK, Balanced Wellness UK, and Claire Snowdon-Darling official. If you've got any questions, please feel free to email us on info@functionalkinesiology.co.uk. I also would say that I do a lot of clubhouses, so Claire Snowdon-Darling on there, and also Laura and I do a live on Facebook each week, which also goes on to IGTV. So we're always talking about a variety of topics. So please, please get involved, and yeah, we'd love to give you much more information. So that is it from me, and I just want to say thank you very, very much for your attention, and I really hope that that has brought together for you why some clients aren't getting well and paths to know what to do about it. But like I said, you can implement some of these new learnings to make those changes, and I really hope that you do. And any questions, please get in touch.